Greetings, programs, and welcome to another episode of the Awesome Friday podcast, the podcast where we talk about two new things in movies or TV every week. My name is Matthew, and joining me, as usual, is Simon. Hello, Simon.
Hello. I'm enjoying the sunshine. Let me tell you, Vancouver suddenly remembered it's actually summertime, so it's beautiful, bright. And I'm using the sunshine to help me forget about the rage I am feeling about modern America. And that's all I'm going to say about that today, because I'm so tired from being angry yesterday. So when you listen to this, it'll be 2 days ago, but yesterday for now was Friday. And I'm just filled with rage, just general rage. And but apart from that, I'm fine. How are you?
Yeah, I mean, rageful as well. For those of you who are listening at a temporally displaced time, we are recording the day after the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and made clear in their opinions that they're coming after other things as well, and it is terrible. I object to the term modern America in this context.
Okay, that's a fair point.
Yeah. It's the America's. I haven't tweeted very much about this. I've been reading a lot, and there's a lot of opinions everywhere. But my general thing is that it's really, really weird actually watching America turn into Gilead.
Mm-hmm.
It's super weird, and it seems like every time someone writes a novel or makes a movie that's a parable that says, "Hey, maybe we should avoid doing this," someone goes, "That looks like a really good idea," and then they run with it. And someone's trying to clone dinosaur DNA right now, and also we're stripping away the rights of women. It's super weird. I'm glad I live in Canada.
Wonderful. But anyway,
I mean, we have our own problems here in Canada, but it's way too much to get into right now. But anyway, the world is on fire, and it's
really is
terrible.
Which sometimes I'm having trouble writing at the moment, because writing about movies or games just feels really flippant at the moment. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it almost seems like disrespectful to how much everything else is on fire. But what I keep telling myself is that it's more important than ever to have little things that make you happy. In fact, I had a lovely exchange on Twitter this week, and I don't usually talk to people, like, I don't usually get into arguments on Twitter, because I made a promise to myself years and years ago, about over a decade ago. I was very active on the Eurogamer forum, long may it rest in peace, and I would get into every argument. I would get stuck in, and that, as a mid-20s person is want to do, and it's exhausting watching for the responses, and being rageful at that as well. So I don't really get stuck in. I know, Matt, you've got a lot more patience with that kind of thing. But on Twitter this week, I was talking about the Cineplex ridiculous $150 charge to every ticket they've just decided is going to be charged to all the online booking people. And someone my message kind of challenged it, say, or it's the pandemic. And we did 4 or 5 tweets, and the 4 or 5 tweets were listening and then challenging each other back. And this guy was great. And I don't go for the snark like I might do in real life. I'm just too tired for that. I just try and explain things as they are. And we ended up just talking in the nicest way about how important it is to find little happy things at the moment. And that really pushed that home for me as well. And it ended on a really positive note. So thank you, person on Twitter, for reminding me there are people on the internet that can actually disagree and have a cordial discussion and end up wishing each other that you have a nice day, and that how important it is to find nice little things. So I guess every time I watch a movie now, it's difficult to forget everything else that's going on, but that is a little slice of something. Otherwise, we're just going to go crazy, aren't we?
I mean, I think we're there. I mean, my experience on Twitter, I think, has always generally been more positive than yours. But also, my block list is like 20,000 people deep at this point. So,
oh yeah, you're ruthless with the block button.
Yeah, I don't stand for much. Like I don't wait. If someone reveals themselves, even like tangent, someone like if someone in my feed like retweets a really bad take or something really heinously offensive or bigoted, I don't engage. I just go, oh, that's an opportunity to block an asshole, and just block them. And just I'm done with it. Like it's not
Oh,
worth my time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And even the times when I think the last two times I've had like a really big like Twitter blow up moment have both been to do with Star Trek, and one was recently where I like posted a trans rights thing and it went nuts, and that was lovely.
Hmm.
Um, and the time before that was a while ago, and I tweeted something about the short treks and how I thought that they were
Hmm.
some of the best Star Trek currently on TV at the time. This was a while ago. This is like a year ago or more. And a bunch of like new Trek hating people came into my mentions, and rather than like quote tweeting them, I just would screenshot and reply, and almost all of my replies were, "This person has clearly never watched Star Trek." But I like doing it that way because that way I can like respond to what they're saying but without actually engaging them, and then I can just block
Yeah,
them, and it was fine.
yeah,
Because Twitter is a wonderful hell site, you know.
yeah. It's a
And
terrible thing. The
and
pro-
I would just like to voice one opinion before we move on. And so, for those of you
Mm.
who were listening to what Simon was saying, Cineplex has just introduced a booking fee. So if and Cineplex is like the biggest movie chain here in Canada, and so if you buy a ticket online, it's $1.50 extra per ticket. So if Simon, for example, wanted to take his whole family to the movies, that's an extra $6. Now, if he's a scene member, which is their like rewards club thing, then it's only $1, and I'm doing the biggest air quotes in the world here. So that'd only be $4. Or if you join their subscription program, there is no surcharge. So it seems like a pretty naked attempt to get people to move toward that. It's also there's no surcharge if you go and talk to a person and buy a ticket at a ticket booth, which for the record is the version of buying a ticket that has the most overhead.
yeah,
So I would just like to
yeah.
I would just like to come out here and say that this is complete bullshit, and
Hmm.
I hate it. And I hate that they're here in Vancouver at least they are almost entirely the only game in town, and I hate that they're going to get away
Hmm.
with it. I hate it.
Yeah. It's like so many things here. They have a monopoly and they can do what they want. And then what are people going to do? They push people towards using the online app really really hard when it came out. It's far more convenient because then you get your ticket on your phone, so it reduces paper waste as well. It's
Hmm.
it There's no machine maintenance for them. There's no person salary for them. So this is the easiest version, the cheapest version for them of us buying into their overpriced experiences with, might I say, the worst popcorn known to mankind when I went last time. Spent $120 fucking dollars taking my family to the movies. Um, and and because it's not there for their sub members, it's a really clearly cynical move to push people to doing like every other fucking business at the moment. Is creating a subscription and then pushing people towards it. It's really disgusting.
Yep, I hate it. I hate it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a member of the rewards program, and but not a member of their new subscription thing. And I don't want to be. I don't like. I don't at the moment feel safe enough to go to the movies on a frequent enough basis to be a member of a subscription program to go to the
Mm-hmm.
movies, which
Mm-hmm.
is really upsetting on a number of levels. But
Mm-hmm.
if I was single and didn't have a full time job or all this other stuff that's going on in my life, then maybe. But none of those things are true. So
Since I moved into a new house and I've got a room with a TV and a myriad of entertainment options and a couch, and it has no windows, so it makes a brilliant film screening room, as you've seen this room. And the reasons for not going to the cinema are all already growing, and then the pandemic got involved, and then extra charges. And honestly, taking them recently, I can't afford to take my family to the cinema. I just can't afford it at the moment, and so they are just giving me another reason to just wait. Things are popping up on demand now. I can just wait for them. I don't have a problem with that, and they're not doing enough to convince me to come back.
yeah, what's really funny though is that
Yes.
we talked for 20 minutes before we started recording this, and then we were like, right, we're gonna be positive. We're not gonna say all the negative stuff. We're not just gonna bitch and moan.
No. No, I said I'm not going to bitch and. I specifically said I'm not going to bitch and moan about how kids make me so tired, which is what you
Right.
had for the first 20 minutes. So
Yeah.
I bent. You had no choice but to listen to that for off screen
To
behind
be
the scenes.
fair, I had a
You should.
choice.
Do you know what you should? You don't have a choice. You never do. That's the wonderful thing about our friendship. You're just there. You should record our pre-podcast stuff and put it up for your Patreon, like
Yeah,
Patreons, because it would be a wonderful insight into how we begin our conversations.
it's true. It's true.
Honestly, there's not a huge difference. A reason why I think our podcast works really, really well is that this is how we talk in real life. This is how we talk. This is why our wives really hate coming to the cinema with us together, especially my wife. Like your wife can detach herself a bit. My wife fucking hates going to the cinema with us because this is how we talk in real life about a movie. My wife's like, yeah, I enjoyed that. And we're like, in scene 3, I felt like the lighting wasn't quite enough to bring out the underscore. And she's like, just like the movie or not. So, so this is a very authentic podcast, and that's why I think it works so well.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all.
Mm.
Good.
So what are we tearing apart to pieces this week?
Well, only one thing. So this week, we're going to talk about two things, and I think we're going to talk about the newer thing first, which is. But before we do, I would just like to point out that we're not going to talk about it in depth. But I saw the Black Phone this week, and it's kind of great. And if you are a parent of a kid who's like 12 to 14, so a little bit older than your son, Simon. Um, it's the perfect horror movie that they should definitely be sneaking into, if that makes
Nice.
sense.
My
Or
kid,
like when
my
it's
kid.
on TV, it's the kind of thing that like they should definitely stay up. Like once their parents are in bed, when you sneak up and watch something you shouldn't watch. This should be the thing that they watch. It's like a perfect
what?
gateway horror for a kid.
Yeah, but what's the quality? Like, what's that definable quality? Are we talking like funny horror, like Gremlins? Like that's the kind of horror I watch to get into horror. Is like adjacent stuff like Evil Dead, although that's pretty adjacent. The Gremlins and
No, it's not really funny.
adventure
It's
horror.
it's scary. It's scary, but there's only one or two there's only one jump scare that really got me, and it's a story about a kid who's locked in a basement by a crazy person, and there's a phone on the wall that's disconnected that he can talk to the spirits of the kids who've previously been murdered by this guy,
Oh,
and
lovely.
it's pretty good, and like I say, it's like it's a really good story of like a kid learning to stand up for himself through this horrible circumstances. And so yeah, if you are listening to this and you have a 14-year-old or are a 14-year-old, this is a movie you should see or let them see. That's the case, maybe.
It's not for my son. He can't deal with any kind of horror or jump scares or really anything like that. Um, but
Your son is
I always
probably a little too young for it too. Like
yeah.
it's perfect like early like mid-teens type thing.
Do you know what that reminds me of? Who's the director of the first Doctor Strange? Scott
The same
Derrickson?
the same guy who directed The Black Phone, Scott Derrickson.
Oh, same director. Because what I find really interesting is that he posts his son's watch list and he lets his sons watch anything, everything. And his son posted, and he's only about 14, I think. And recently he did a like best of like the films he's seen, and the list was incredible. Like the amount of things he'd seen, and it was a really good list as well. And I kind of think that's not the approach we took with our kids, but Scott Derrickson's clearly gone. You can watch anything you want, like watch everything, watch different things, and make your own opinions. I think that's kind of awesome because he's going to grow up with such great film literacy.
Yep. There's a film critic I like called Drew McQueenie who has two kids. Um, and he actually wrote a book at one point called Film Nerd 2.0, and it's the same deal. He just says, "Okay, this is the movie we're going to watch tonight," and he just shows them stuff. And those kids are going to grow up to be amazing movie people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's our
Good.
first thing we're talking about
So
before?
we're gonna talk about the shiny new Netflix movie, The Sea Beast, which is very much like the Black Phone in that it's intended for kids. Um, this is a new Netflix release. It is coming out on July the huh?
Yeah, it's mid-July, isn't it? We're quite early with this one.
I think it's July the 8th. It's the first or the 8th. I can't remember which off the top of my head. I should
Mhm.
look that. We should. This seems like the kind of thing that a professional would know. Um, but it is an animated feature. It's also playing right now. So if you happen to be in Vancouver or Toronto, you can actually go see this in a theater right now. And I think you probably should. It's pretty good. Yeah, debuting on July the 8th, playing in Vancouver and Toronto, and I'm sure some
Right.
American cities right now.
Okay.
And it's so I'm gonna let you talk about this one a little bit, Simon,
Yeah.
because in terms of the breakdown of the plot, just because I liked it, but I think you liked it more than me, based on our
Yeah.
very brief exchanges about it all so far.
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, there's lots of this movie that, lots of themes and characters and things in this film that I really loved and really loved how it mixed together. But I can, as I'll talk about a little bit later, and I texted this to you last night. There's a mix of styles that is either going to work for you or it's going to feel just kind of disjointed, which really was my wife's takeaway. But this movie's about, it's classic mid 1800s ragtag group of, I mean, they're pirates, but they're not pirates. They're hunters. They
Hmm.
sail the seven seas. They shout orders at each other and drink lots of alcohol, and they're all very rough and ready people. And they are legends in the time. There's storybooks about them because they hunt the sea beasts, and this great kingdom that hires them. Uses them to kill the sea beasts that used to ravage the coastal towns and come in and steal women, steal children, and these brave hunters go out. And it opens with this absolutely tremendous sequence of um, the pirate captain, so brilliantly voiced by Jared Harris. And honestly, I would have Jared Harris in every film, like live action animated. If it was possible, I'd just cast him in everything because he voices the old Sea Dog captain, and this captain, in a very Moby Dick kind of style, is going after this one uh, beast that he's been hunting for 30 years, and they're getting close to this beast, and then he one of his buddies gets in trouble, so they go and help him, and they help him by fighting off this kind of lobster kraken from his buddy ship, and it is a, as with all the sea battle scenes, it is spectacularly directed and choreographed. It's so exciting, and it reminded me that there's lots of influences here. There's very clear Pirates of the Caribbean. There's very clear Moby Dick. There's very clear Moana. There's even a dose of Lilo and Stitch at one point. And it's by one of the directors of Moana and Big Hero 6, so it's not a huge surprise to see those influences. But it tells the story of this stowaway, this young girl called Maisie, who reads the stories of these hunters and decides to join them for her own personal reasons. And I don't think you will, when you watch this movie at quite an early point, you'll realize, oh, it's going to be that kind of movie because her influence and the sea beast's influence then influences the humans around her. And who knew the royals were bad all along? I mean, historically, the British royals have done so much for the world, and when they're surrounded by like the most incredibly designed golden palace, multi-layered golden palace, and exquisitely designed like hunting ship they've built, just because they've got British accents doesn't mean they're nasty people. I don't know, I don't know where they get this historical stereotype from, but it doesn't, it doesn't, it didn't matter for me that it it was a story that we've seen before. I'm not going to spoil it, but you can probably guess even from the way we're talking about it. The characters are really, really dynamic, and the art style I thought was a really interesting mix where the physical objects are super detailed. So buildings, ships, like physical objects, highly detailed. The humans are really, really stylized, very chunky faces, very angular faces as well. And then the monsters are like one primary color. They're a shape and a color. So you've actually got these three different animation styles. And for me, it worked like gangbusters. I loved it. But obviously, I know you didn't feel the same way as strongly as I did. Like, what's your take on that?
I thought it was pretty good. My I didn't think that the I don't know what to say about this movie you haven't already said. Basically, everything Simon just said is true. Parts of the stylistic differences are going to again either work for you or not. The For me, I found it a little disjointed. Um, but I think it's just a personal preference type thing. I also found that it was and this is sort of a weird thing, but I really like when animation treats the camera like a camera, and this was just always in full focus everywhere the whole time. There was never any like camera work um, that I remember anyway. So there was never any like rack focuses or any like
Oh,
things like that, right? It was just always everything
mhm.
was always in focus all the time, and I found that a little again kind of kicked me out of it a little bit. Um, but I mean, the animation itself is exquisite. Like all three styles are exquisite.
Yeah.
Um, the Many of the physical objects are effectively like they're photorealistic. There was a moment
Hmm.
toward the end where when a character like walks onto this bit of like stone
Mm-hmm.
rubble, and I was like, that looks like a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and
Totally.
then when like the animated, highly stylized animated hand like landed on it, and I was like, did they just take a
Mm-hmm.
photograph? Like it looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
The characters mostly also look amazing, and the monsters themselves are a little bit simplistic, but very purposefully so. Like they're meant to be. I mean, there's
They look like child's drawings, don't they?
a
Really,
little
they
bit,
look like
yeah. And I
yeah,
think
and
the
yeah,
problem here is that like I don't want to spoil the how this movie goes down, but like I've seen How to Train Your Dragon, so if you've seen
yeah,
that
yeah,
movie,
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
you know where the young character who grows up in a world where everyone thinks that the monsters are monsters, and then maybe discovers that maybe they're not, and then has to convince the world that they're not monsters. I mean, we've seen this movie before. How to Train Your Dragon has done it 3 times. um,
Yeah,
and I think maybe my problem is that I think like How to Train Your Dragon is by far one of my favorite animated features,
yeah.
and it's a tough. And I hate being the guy to be like I like that one better, but in this
Mhm.
particular case, I had a hard time not making that comparison because they were so similar. I also, and this maybe someone with an English accent, Simon, can confirm this, but I some of the voice work in this is really good. Jared Harris is really good. Um, I thought that the young girl who played Maisie, whose name I have also blanked off the
She's
top of
called
my head,
Zaris Angel. I'm going to say Hator, Hator. I'm
yeah,
sorry if you're listening, which you're not, but I'm sorry if I've mangled your name.
and like I thought she was pretty good, um, and I thought that Carla Urban plays the like the basically the main adult character, like the co-protagonist of the story, and I think he's very generally quite good. Um, I do wish he'd settled on an accent ahead of time, a
Uh,
little
I,
bit.
I, I didn't know it was Karl Urban, and about three-quarters of the way through the movie, I thought this about another movie recently. I'm like, his shifting regional accent has to be a plot point, right? Like at some point that's going to be a thing where he turns out to be secretly from like that he's related to the royals or he's because he would either be really really posh or like really really Yorkshire or really really like southern and it's weird because he could have just used the voice that he uses in Thor Ragnarok and it would have been perfect, like which is completely solid. I call this, what are his guns called in Thor Ragnarok? This one's, come on, Matt. You're the one who
Oh
remembers
yeah,
quotes.
why am I not remembering this?
Oh,
Anyway,
this
my
is my stuff. Anyway.
yeah, my problem is that well, I mean, in Thor Ragnarok, they basically let him. I mean, he sort of drifts between his accent from Thor Ragnarok, his accent from The Boys, which is like a really bad Cockney accent, but that kind of works within the it works within
Mhm,
the confines of The Boys. And then occasionally he would just be his normal Kiwi self in this movie, and I
mhm.
found the shifting around a little bit distracting.
Yeah, it was all over the place. Yeah.
Um, but all this is like very nitpicky. Like I like the movie; it's a good movie. It's a totally solid movie. Uh, you know, perfect double up the middle, great for kids. I kind of can't believe that Netflix produced this. I know they hired Sony Animation to do the animation itself, but it is a
Mhm.
Netflix production, not something that they purchased. And
Yeah.
Chris Williams is a good director. I mean, he directed
Mhm,
Bolt and Big Hero 6,
mhm,
and he's been involved in animation his entire career. He's very talented. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this movie, and this is the kind of movie that I think I hate reviewing the most because
mhm.
for me it falls into that trap of it's fine and I don't have
Yeah,
that
no,
much to say
I did
about
think of
it.
you when I was watching it because I'm the one watching it with two kids as well, and I think that context gives you a very different feeling towards watching kids movies. Like
100%
the
it does.
yeah, and the it helped for me is that I know you love How to Train Your Dragon, and this is very similar thematically. I don't love How to Train Your Dragon, so I don't have that milestone to go that obstacle to get over. And also, I'm kind of really into swashbuckling pirate stories, and what the movies I grew up loving were the old Ray Harryhausen Clash of the Titans stop frame animation, big monsters versus little people, and this just like they were so the monsters were all like primary colors drawn in crayon. Well, they weren't drawn in crayon, but they were just big chunky things, and it really just triggered that for me, that kind of childlike wonder. And I loved the direction of the camera work as well. It really stood out for me, the direction of particularly the battle scenes, where I thought were just like spectacular, like dances. And
So I
so
mean some of
I
the first battle scene in particular is pretty excellent.
yeah.
And there's a moment where the grizzled pirate captain like flies through the air and stabs a sea beast in the chest and then like
Mhm.
goes down with it for like into the water with it for a while,
Mhm.
and that's a pretty great moment. Like there's this movie is
Mhm.
full of great moments, and I think I think you should definitely watch it. What more can I say? I think it's fine. I think you should totally watch it, especially if you have kids. I think if you have kids, this is a great movie for them. There is some animal death, but like they're giant monsters. It should be pretty easy to deal with.
Uh, my daughter tapped out when the first monster died. She stormed upstairs. You know I don't like movies where nice things die, and I'm like, but it's a sea monster. Didn't
Yeah,
help. Didn't help at all. But the what I will say is that something I wanted to happen didn't happen. It's a little nitpicky by me that the royals unveil this absolutely like it's if Trump were an 1800s hunting ship. It's like 400 cannons and gold lined, and it's completely over the top. And so the royals want to use their own navy ship to hunt the sea beasts instead of paying for the hunters. So there's meant to be this chase. That story thread never really figures. Actually, there's no real chase that you expect it to happen. What I kind of thought at
I
the
actually really
end,
liked how they handled that. To be honest, like
yeah,
without
that it
without going
just
into spoilers, but like,
mhm,
and it's definitely a move you've seen in other films where like we
yeah,
have a big new weapon and it should do the job perfectly, and then
yes.
spoiler alert, it does not do the job perfectly.
Basically, the yes, it was a bit of an Indiana Jones in the market moment with this ship. Like I was
Yeah,
kind of expecting there to be a big like old ship plus sea monster plus new ship in a big battle, and it doesn't go there. But the way it does resolve it is unexpected, and it does work. So, I mean, like the whole film for me, it just worked brilliantly. I really loved it, and it does look different from usual Netflix productions for sure. Like way better.
yeah. It's I mean Netflix's reputation at this point, deserved or not, is that most of their original films are not that great.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that that's 100% true. They put out so much stuff that it's actually kind of hard to separate the signal from the noise. But this is a good movie, and
Mm-hmm.
my sincere worry about it is that it'll be when it debuts on Netflix on the 8th, it'll be popular for a week and then disappear into the algorithm and no one will watch it.
Like everything else
Like
or whatever.
everything else that happens, good or bad, like everything else that debuts on Netflix.
Yeah.
It takes this special kind of something to rise above the algorithm in Netflix, and I think currently the
Hmm.
only thing that's really doing it is Stranger Things.
Yeah. Is that good? Have you watched? Sorry, a slight deviation. Have you watched the new season of Stranger Things?
Yes, we really liked it actually, and we're
Oh,
the last two episodes, which are both feature length of this season, are coming out soon, and we're on Canada Day, and I may or may not have the day off to watch it specifically
okay, that's a good sign.
because the first
Okay,
it's an 8 episodes or no a 9 episode season, and the first seven have aired, and they were mostly like they're all a little longer than normal. Like a lot of them were as many as 90 minutes, but the last two episodes are 90 minutes and 2.5 hours. So it's a
the
solid,
last episode of a TV show is 2.5 hours.
yeah, of this season. Of the season, the last episode of the season is 2.5 hours,
Wow.
or something ridiculous like that.
And is this the final season? Is this like series ender kind of thing?
Um, it very much could be, but I'm pretty sure they're going to get a fifth and
Right.
final.
Right.
So, and that's very much the Sea Beast.
Okay. Yeah. Fine.
So
How
what are
many
you going to
stars
give
are you
this?
giving us?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm giving it. It's a perfectly adequate, perfectly solid three for me. 3 to 5.
Yeah. It, I wanted to give. Honestly, I enjoyed it so much. I thought about giving it a 5, but it's a very, very good 4 for me. There's a few pacey moments, and there's a few things that I would have preferred. Very minor nitpicks. I would love to go and see it in the cinema. And I can't. There's not many movies I feel like that about, but it is. It's a very big movie. There's lots of big things happening, and I would love to go see it because it's so colourful as well. It's a very solid 4 for me.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. I do actually wonder. Going back to our earlier conversation, this is playing here in Vancouver and it is playing in Toronto, and I wonder if I would have reacted better to it in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have a very good home theater setup, but it does feel like the kind of
Mm-hmm.
movie that if you
Mm-hmm.
saw it in a theater, especially if you saw it in a theater with a bunch of kids around, it might hit a lot harder.
Yeah, for sure,
Um,
definitely.
which it sort of reminds me, like I love all of the How to Train Your Dragon movies, to be clear, but one of my and this is totally off topic, but one of my favorite movie going memories is when I saw How to Train Your Dragon 3. um, I went to the theater by myself, and it was just full of kids because of course it is. It's a kids movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sitting in this row, and beside me is a dad, and between and then there's like four kids, and then another dad. And so, but the dads are just like, I'm here with my kids. They're not really talking, and I'm just sitting there, and these four kids are talking. And at one point, this one kid is like talking about how great he is at soccer, and he's like, but you know what else? I'm trying to do really well in science class. And one of the other kids is like, why? You're so good at soccer. Like, why wouldn't you just focus on soccer? He's like, well, I want something to fall back
Oh my
on.
god!
And this is like a 12-year-old, just to be clear. Like, it's just there's such
Nice.
like, and you could just see the dads like making eye contact and being like giving each other a nod. You know, like, it was pretty great. It was pretty great.
Nice to be
Um,
cynical so young.
yeah,
Watching movies with a lot of kids is kind of weird because I'm definitely very reactive to people talking in the cinema. Like people just shut the fuck up and watch the movie when we go and watch a movie. Anyone talking in the cinema, I go straight to fucking rage and I can't control it, and it really bothers me because sometimes it ruins the movie. You go and watch a movie with kids and it's like a million directors' commentaries all happening at the same time, but it's kind of amazing because they're all talking about like immediately reacting to what they're seeing and what they're feeling, and like, could that be him? Oh no, here he comes! And it's like a pantomime, and it's kind of amazing. So it's a very different experience.
yeah.
I do
It's
like it.
I mean they're kids. You kind of have to let them get away
Yeah,
with it a little bit.
yeah. And my
So
son fist bumping at the end of Top Gun Maverick is a something I'll remember for a long time because like he's that very it was like the end of Breakfast Club, just like yeah, it was amazing. Okay,
Okay,
so
well,
should we move on?
that's the Sea Beast again. One last time. If you live in Vancouver, it's playing at Scotiabank, and if you live
Hmm.
in Toronto, it is playing at a theater in Toronto, which I have the name of. Um,
You
hang
should
on,
go see it.
you should
You
go.
should go
You
see it
definitely,
and buy tickets in person for fuck's sake. Don't use
yeah,
the app.
yeah. Sorry, it's playing at Scotiabank Theatre in Toronto, and it's playing at Cineplex Odeon International Village here in Vancouver. And it does debut on Netflix on the 8th. So do if you can, if you have the opportunity, if you have kids, it's a great one to take your kids to see, and you should
Hmm.
totally do that.
Hmm.
Yeah. So moving
Okay.
on, we're going to talk about something not quite as new.
Well,
Recently,
I mean,
this
it's
week,
kind of new. Yeah.
yeah, this week marked the finale of the 6 episode limited Obi-Wan Kenobi series on Disney Plus, the latest entry in the ongoing Star Wars saga, which is a very weird sentence to say if you're as old as we are, I think. Um, and it is, in a word, divisive, maybe would be the word for it. Um, but we are going to talk about it, and spoiler alert, I didn't really like it. it's I don't know. It's a tough one. We wanted to talk about it because we've been holding off talking about it since it started, basically. Um, but the problem is that it's a show. I don't know how to describe this show because there's such a weird dissonance about how I feel about it. Because on the one hand, I think a lot of the acting is really good, and on the other hand, I think the show itself is pretty bad. So if you didn't watch it, and it's over now, so spoilers if you haven't, but you definitely can. It's on Disney Plus. All 6 episodes are out. But basically, it's set about 10 years after the Revenge of the Sith, and about 10 years before A New Hope, or Star Wars, as we used to call it. Um, Obi-Wan Kenobi is a former general of the Republic, living in seclusion, a hero defeated, who is recalled to action when his old friend Bail Organa, played by Jimmy Smits, calls him and lets him know that Leia has been kidnapped, that his daughter, and famously Darth Vader's daughter, has been kidnapped, and it's all a ruse by the Inquisitors, who are force using. They're basically the Jedi but bad that exist between the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, um, and they want to find Obi-Wan Kenobi because Darth Vader wants to resolve his everything by facing off against Obi-Wan Kenobi. And this show is just a mess. I'm sorry, it's just a mess. I don't know why I can't describe the plot a little more succinctly, but it's because it's sort of a mess. It's a 6 episode series. It's structured like a film, which is kind of frustrating. I mean, it makes sense because it's a limited series, but it's very frustrating to watch. Um, I didn't. I think that Ewan McGregor is really good. I actually think that Hayden Christensen, in the few scenes especially the few scenes where we get to see his face, is actually really good. Moses Ingram plays the main Inquisitor in the story, the third sister, Riva, and she is incredible. Um, I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point, man. How do you? You're the Star Wars fan. You're the
Yeah.
guy who grew up with Star. I'm the Star Trek guy. You're the Star Wars guy. So,
Hmm.
as a Star Wars fan, how do you feel, just very generally before we get into any specifics, how do you feel overall about the series? Because I wanted to love it. This is the kind of show, the kind of premise that I wanted to love, and I just don't. And I kind of hate it because of that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I kind of dreading talking about it because, well, two white guys, two 45-year-old white guys talking about Star Wars is a pretty common thing you can find on the internet, and I don't.
well, hey,
This,
and you shouldn't be afraid. Star Wars fans are known for their polite and reasonable reactions to negative
Now,
criticism.
you know when you just decide not to tell people you like something anymore because of the negative kind of implications of it. That's kind of where I am with Star Wars at the moment. But that's a whole different thing. My reaction to Kenobi is that it just wasn't good enough. It just wasn't good enough. Like it's so uneven as a show. And I think the most frustrating thing for me, as a someone whose whole life has been defined by this one fucking movie, not even series, but this like one film that has led to all the other films that has led to everything else. That the there's flashes in these 6 episodes of what it could have been. There's
Hmm.
incredible potential for what it could have been. Like, and the top of that potential pyramid is Ewan McGregor's performance as Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is genuinely like goes from heartbreaking to compassionate. He is just an incredible actor, which we knew already. But I I think to find someone who is able to bridge the gap to pre Star Wars Alec Guinness and do it that honors Guinness's performance and his kind of delivery and his stature, but also make it his own. Ewan McGregor just blew me out the water. I thought he was amazing. Hayden Christensen, it's so lovely to see him, and I said this to you yesterday. One of my happiest things about this is seeing how just genuinely touched he is at the fan reaction to having him back, because he didn't have to come back. It was by and large quite a negative part of his life, the reaction to it. But the show, the the narrative outlined, like the reasons for things happening in this show, were secondary to, for them, how do we connect all these cool moments that we want to share? Okay, so we want to show this cool thing. So how do we connect those dots? And the how do we connect those dots had such big holes. The writing was so basic and let them down on so many times. And the giant like what is going on here moments. Every episode had one moment, and it became kind of funny for me at the end where I'm like, okay, what's the moment going to be in this episode where I put my head in my hands and go, why is this happening? I don't understand why this is happening. It's only happening so they can get to their next like tweetable moment. And it's a shame because the first three, where are we? 6 episodes, right? So the first 4 episodes I thought were up and down. I have to say I thought all the cast were fantastic, and there's lots of fucking idiots picking on Moses Ingram, who is a highly trained actor and a Harvard graduate and was brilliant at what she does in this. What she had, fantastic. The young girl that plays Princess Leia, who performed the script she was given. So how you feel about how it was written is separate. She was brilliant as well. I think they really lucked out in finding someone who captured like that Carrie Fisher spark. Sun Kang is fantastic. If only he had literally anything else to do.
Or anything
Indira
at
Vel,
all. Anything at
yeah,
all to do.
Indira Varma's fantastic. Like the cast, I don't like Rupert Friend as the Inquisitor. I don't like his delivery at all compared
I
to
started
Jason
liked him
Isaacs.
actually.
Oh, did you? It didn't work for me,
I
but
I mean, I'm a
the
big fan of the Grand Inquisitor from Rebels, where he was
mhm.
Jason Isaacs. But I sort of loved this version of him, who is
Hello.
yeah. But I really like Rupert Friend. Like it's
Right, right. But
yeah.
the so yeah, I there's lots of things I thought were fantastic, and that made it even worse. If it was all terrible, then you could just go, oh yeah, this was just bad. This was another Book of Boba Fett where everyone's sleepwalking through it, and it's just really bad. There was so many positive aspects of what this could have been, and they just there's so many narrative decisions that frustrated me and made no sense. And ultimately, like, why does this exist? Like, what story is it trying to tell? And most of the time I don't know what the answer to that is. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's been really frustrating actually. There's two other things on TV right now that are in many ways I think similar to Obi-Wan Kenobi. One of them is Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is a prequel series to the original Star Trek series, and in many ways, it is playing fast and loose with the continuity of Star Trek. And the other one is Ms. Marvel, which is another entry in a huge Disney franchise with connections to a myriad of other properties. And the thing there's the thing that strikes me about the reason I bring them both up is the thing that strikes me about Star Trek Strange New Worlds versus Kenobi is that Strange New Worlds seems to be excited to be Star Trek, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Whereas Kenobi seems kind of resigned to being more Star Wars.
Hmm.
Right? I know it's like a more somber story. Like Strange New World's most recent episode, they go into a nebula that turns out to be sentient and turns the ship into a fairy tale for a young girl. Like it is a ridiculous show in the best way possible. Um, but it feels like the people making Star Wars, and I think to the reason I bring up Ms. Marvel is that Miss Marvel seems to be concerned with being its own thing first and then establishing connections that serve that story. Whereas
Hmm.
Kenobi seems to be that the story serves the connections to Star
Hmm.
Wars, if that makes sense.
Well,
Am I
the
saying
story
that
is
well
getting,
enough?
yeah, absolutely. The
Like,
story is getting to one connection. They're getting to the thing. This whole series exists because fans wanted to see the fight between Obi-Wan and Darth that is referenced in A New Hope. Like they want to get to the point where Obi-Wan learns that Darth is Darth, although he learned at the end of Revenge of the Sith, but they want to see more of these two leading to that discussed moment. And that's what it felt like for me. Like the whole series served to make this one callback. And to be fair,
to
when
be
they get
fair,
there, when they get there, the interaction between them is probably the highlight of the whole season for me. And I
yeah,
won't really spoil what is said, but
but you
uh,
don't have to
oh,
spoil it because they've already done that fight. This is the other thing that
mm,
bothers me, and I know that like saying, "Well, you should watch the animated stuff," to get the whole picture. But like, if you have watched Star Wars Rebels, you know that we already had a version of this exact same fight between Darth Vader and Ahsoka Tano, who Anakin Skywalker was Ahsoka Tano's master. She was his Padawan, and they basically have the same fight with basically the same resolution. It's really frustrating to just, I mean, and it looked really cool, and I don't want to minimize the fact that Hayden Christensen's performance in that moment um, is incredible. I think it's, and
mm,
I've seen a bunch of stuff that he's been in just aside from Star Wars, and it's really a shame how he sort of was bullied out of the business, but like,
mm.
um, he's actually a really good actor,
He's so charismatic. Yeah, I've seen him
and
live in London. He was amazing.
yeah, that moment where they have their emotional confrontation after they fight for a while is
Hmm.
legitimately incredible.
Hmm.
I do actually think though that having Obi-Wan and Darth meet for the first time in A New Hope after their showdown at the end of Revenge of the Sith is more powerful than after this fight in the middle of those two things.
Hmm.
And it just feels like the show is just trying to be more Star Wars instead of trying to be its own good thing first.
That
And try
exists
instead of
within the story. Yeah.
and as much as I think that that moment was also a highlight of the series for me, I think that this show probably could have been a better, more interesting show if Darth Vader had not been in it.
Ooh, because originally it was Darth Maul, and before the rewrites, it was Darth Maul.
Yeah, but even that's problematic, right?
they
Like,
they had Ray Park prepped, like he was in pre-production, and then the whole thing got rewritten and delayed.
yeah, but we've already seen Darth Maul's. Here's the thing. So yeah, we've already seen again. Not to be like you have to watch all this other stuff, but if you've watched Clone Wars, or more particularly if you've watched Rebels, we have already seen Darth Maul's entire character arc and resolution.
Hmm.
And I'm just tired of, and I guess to come back to Ms. Marvel for a second, the thing I think that's really important about Ms. Marvel is that it's pushing the Marvel universe into new places.
Mm-hmm.
Introducing more multicultural heroes. It's Kamala Khan herself being like a Marvel fangirl, being like an Avengers fangirl, is a really nice analog for every young girl that's watching the show and every person that's watching the show, really. Um, and but everything that Star Wars has done, especially since The Last Jedi, just makes the universe smaller in ways that I find really frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
And everything about the show, like, there's a moment in the finale where Obi-Wan Kenobi, like, in a moment of self-sacrifice, looks directly at the camera and says, like, they're trying to escape this Star Destroyer, and Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "I'll take the smaller ship and go to a planet and lure him away. And one way or another, this ends today." But like, no, it won't. No, it won't. Are you trying
Yeah.
to? Are you trying to pretend that I haven't seen A New Hope, even just A New
Mm-hmm.
Hope at this point, right? Like, we know it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to end today, right? It doesn't really make sense for him to, even if within his experience to this point in the timeline, it just doesn't really make sense to have him say that. And then at the end of the day, he wins and then he walks away. Like, it doesn't. I don't know. I'm so frustrated. The show is full of moments where someone has the upper hand and could just win, and then
Oh
walks
God.
away.
Oh my God, it happens so often, and it just drives me crazy because you know it's because they need them for the story, but it doesn't make sense in the story. Like
Well, they don't need them
the
for this
the
story. They need them for, like, they can't. You can't have Obi-Wan win and kill Vader because Vader's in the original trilogy, and this is set before. They are hamstrung
Mhm,
by the existing material, and I hate it. I hate it. I really want Star Wars to stop doing this. I really want Star Wars to do something new and interesting. Set it, if you're going to make a prequel, set it 3,000 years in the past, like before the Old Republic. And if you're going
mhm,
to do a sequel, set it 100 years in the future, and have some minor homages to stuff that happened before. Um,
mhm.
but, like, just do something new. Stop, because the other
Or
thing,
just
uh,
so,
I am
or
so
just
frustrated. I
let me interrupt there where you get your other thing together because I just want to say that the uh, the same themes but with different people in a different place. They don't even have to go like and design a whole new version of this world. Just go somewhere else with new people. My daughter wants to has wanted to restart Rebels, so we watched the first episode of Rebels this morning, and it is just miles above everything else that's being produced because it's different people in a different place doing interesting things but with the same like themes underneath it, and it feels like the whole universe is being pushed forward instead of the same people doing the things that we know how it's going to be resolved. Okay, what's your thing?
Yeah, and especially with Rebels, it takes great pains to not involve hardly anyone from the original trilogy, especially on the hero. I mean, but Vader shows up and the Empire shows up, but
Mm-hmm.
there's not. It's mostly new characters, and like the one time you see Luke, it's in the distance, and he's like 10. Um, and the one time we see Obi-Wan, it's again the resolution to Darth Maul's story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, I think, one of the best moments in Star Wars is that final showdown between Obi-Wan and Maul in that series.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that every time they do one of these shows that fills in the gap between two things we've already had, it makes the universe not only smaller just because we're seeing the same stuff over and over again, but like, I have a much harder time with Darth Vader being redeemed at the end of the Return of the Jedi now than I did before, and the reason for that is I have seen him murder so many more people and
Mm-hmm.
so many more children, and just being every time he does some evil, heinous thing, I'm like, why did this guy get a redemption at the like? I did not really like the Rise of Skywalker, but I will say one thing I did really like about it is at the end of that movie, Kylo Ren reverts back into being Ben Solo, comes and saves Rey, gives his life to do so, and then just dies and goes away. There's no Force ghosts because he
Mhm.
was too evil to be fully redeemed. And
Mhm.
Darth Vader at this point is too evil to be fully redeemed, like he is at the end of the Return of the Jedi.
Mhm.
Because we just see him. I think from the and it's honestly got pretty hard when we saw him murdering children in the prequel trilogy, but it's also more hard now that we've seen him murdering children up close in this TV series. It's
Yeah, that's the
it's
thing. Like the since another reason, I know we have mixed, differing opinions about Rogue One. I adore Rogue One because it takes a gap in the mythos and fills it with new people, and but it still links back. But the element with Darth Vader at the end, which got added very very late into post production to give it this finale, is Darth Vader being full like evil Vader, and the reaction to that from many many fans is like, yeah, evil Darth Vader's cool. Let's see Darth Vader be more evil, which is good because he is a bad character. He is a dis- despicably evil character, as we've seen him. And in Obi-Wan, they like take that and they actually went way further with it than I thought they would. Like there are close up moments of him just randomly breaking a young person's neck just because he can, and so I absolutely agree with you. Like the more we see him being the Vader that we always thought he was, it makes sort of his final moment of, oh no, it's fine, I'm fine, thanks Luke, you were right, there was good in me all along, just not when I was snapping the necks of the children or
yeah,
doing this thing. It is tough.
yeah. So I mean, the whole show is, and I think it's probably, I think you can hear it in my voice that like the word for the show is frustrating
Hmm.
because there are so many things in it that I like. There's is by the same token as you saying that there's one moment in every episode where you just sort of go, oh, for Christ's sake, why is this happening?
Yeah.
There's also a moment in every episode where you're like, that is amazing. Every episode has one.
Hmm.
Every single
Hmm.
episode has one where you think, wow, that is really cool, or Ewan
Hmm.
McGregor did an amazing job with that, or this new character is super interesting. Um, but at the end, like the resolution is just sort of there is no resolution because there can't be because all these people need to be in their places for Star Wars. You know, like
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
and like and again, just to be clear, like I think Star Wars Rebels is a really great show, and I think that Dave Filoni has done a lot of really good things for Star Wars. But the more we see of the Inquisitors, the more I have to wonder where were they during A New Hope, right?
Hmm.
Like they're
Exactly.
super,
Yeah.
they're basically Jedi but bad. But by the time of A New Hope, they're just all gone. Like I don't really, and I'm sure someone is making a show that's going to like explain that.
Oh,
But
absolutely, for sure. Like there's many of these shows I've just there to answer those questions, and the more they kind of paint themselves into the corner, the more they're contradicting their own continuity. And Star Wars does pay attention to its own continuity way more than Trek does, and so they need more material, more content, quote unquote, to kind of explain away like how does Leia know, like Leia clearly knows Obi-Wan, so we'll put in this part where he says, "You should pretend that you don't." I don't know why he's Sean Connery. You should pretend that you don't know me. Like it's just like, oh, yeah, they're looping a back. It's like a recursive loop as they're trying to paint over the gaps that they're creating for themselves. It's just
yeah,
very frustrating.
yeah, and yeah, my position remains the same that this show, if it didn't have Darth Vader in it, or even any Inquisitors or anyone else Force sensitive at all, if it had just been about the path, the Underground Railroad for Jedi coming to find Obi-Wan and ask for their help to do a thing and save another Jedi or save a youngling or something, I think it would have been a better show. I think it would have served the themes of him
Hmm.
finding himself again better. I think it would
Hmm.
have given everyone plenty of opportunity to act, and you could still have Riva or any one of the Inquisitors show up to be like the threat in the background.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it would have been a better show without like that with the fewer connections to existing Star Wars lore,
Hmm.
the better. I think would have been the case with the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking at the beginning, very early on, I kind of thought that, including Leia is a mistake, just on a basic level.
So
Like,
here's
I'm
the thing,
glad.
though. I'm actually sort of fine with it being Leia, if only because it wasn't Luke.
Yeah, fair enough.
You know what I mean? Like,
That would have,
and
yeah,
and
yeah. But
having and have and having
it's
Leia
still
be
another.
I mean, it's just another thing for them to like have to plaster over. You're not wrong, but like, it's so like even 5, 10 years ago, it would have just been Luke, and we would have had to like, and then there'd be fanboys all over the internet being like, after the finale
Mm,
aired, being like, "Oh yeah, there was that moment where Obi-Wan looks at Luke Skywalker and they share like a knowing 0.5 second glance, and that's the moment where you know that this adventure really happened because they're remembering and they're just refusing to talk about it and just explaining themselves into a
mm.
frenzy. Because one of the other
But
things, my experience of watching the show is following people on Twitter and TikTok especially who are like raving about it, and I'm just like, are you watching this? Are you paying attention? Like,
mm,
it's funny you bring up that moment in Rogue One with Vader at the end because I think I think that's all the people who profess to be Star Wars fans. I think that's all they want is a Darth Vader killing people in a hallway. That's what they want from Star
yeah.
Wars, and it's really again frustrating.
I I'm disappointed that Kenobi was another Star Wars story where you had an older warrior veteran type looking after a child and learning about compassion on the way. Like, have we? Everyone's seen The Mandalorian. Everyone's seen that story. I think in the first episode of Obi-Wan, it opens with the Inquisitors hunting a Jedi and they find him, and it's this like I don't know, 17-year-old boy, 18-year-old boy who is fleeing by himself and he can't help himself but be good. And at that point, Kenobi has disconnected from the Force, so he doesn't try and be the good Jedi. And this character is just used, he comes to find Obi-Wan, and then next time we see him, he's hanging, he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if it would have been a much more interesting story if Kenobi had actually that character had stuck around to be the motivation for Kenobi to try and reconnect with the Force, to try and save this older kid, because we haven't really seen that. We've seen the older and baby. We've seen learning from them. Like we've seen that a couple of times now. I don't need to see that again. But I'd be interested in like a what's his name from Rebels, the kid from
Oh,
Rebels,
Ezra.
Ezra. So an Ezra kind of relationship with this old battled hero who, and he clearly knew who Obi-Wan was. So there's a bit of hero worship there. So you've already got this established that you've got this like young Jedi who worships this old warrior who doesn't want to be that old warrior anymore. Like, isn't that interesting? Like, where does that go from that point as he tries to keep this kid away from Reva? Wouldn't that have been a bit more interesting? And it wouldn't have affected anything. It wouldn't have affected anything in the future because we don't see this kid again.
And you could easily just like work in like the one connection you need to Luke by just having Ben stop by Owen and being like, "I'll be off planet for a few days,"
Mm-hmm.
and then have Luke run by in the background. Like it's it's not that
But then,
hard to make connections that serve the story rather than stories that serve those connections.
but then you couldn't have badass Aunt Beru who apparently stashes weapons all over the compound in case they get invaded, because that was a very obvious point for that character to go to.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, we haven't even talked about how legitimately bad. And I hate to say this because Deborah Chow has done some other good stuff, but like, I don't know how. There's no. It's always you always want to blame the director, but I'm sure there's more blame to go around. That like the action direction in the show is just terrible.
Yeah, it was really really bad.
And even in
And
the moments where it should be good, in particular that last fight between Obi-Wan and Vader in the last episode, there's just no clear sense of geography. There's no clear sense of movement. Um, and although there's some cool moments, like the acting and the act that moment where they capital A act with one another is incredible, but the fight that leads up to it is kind of a mess. And
Yep.
I'm so
Yeah.
it's hard to see, and I hate it. I hate it.
And that's consistent in every episode. The spaceship scenes are probably some of the worst I've seen in any modern sci-fi, and not just terms in of the CG and the compositing, but the way that it looks like someone's holding them, like the hands just off screen. There's an episode where some snow speeders arrive to save the day, and they're flying. They're like half in frame, and you can almost hear someone going, "Meow, bah, 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 bah." Like it is. And then one starts randomly floating, and that they're just about to fly into a wall, and it cuts away, and they're fine. Like it's spectacularly terrible, the action
Hmm.
direction. And it doesn't help that they're using this volume system, this backdrop that can't deal with fast movements or deep CG or any kind of dynamic shots because it shows the seams. It's basically a wraparound set of thin TV screens that they can project any background onto. And if you put the camera in the wrong position, you can see that it's completely fake. So
Hmm.
it's just really stilted and flat and bland. In the last episode, the whole end sequence cuts between nighttime on Tatooine and nighttime on Lightsaber Fight Planet, which of course they had to land in nighttime, so their glowy nightsticks look good. And they're both running through rocks, and they're cutting back and forth between these two narratives, and it looks exactly the same. There is no difference between these planets. They might as well be next to each other, and it's just creative decisions like that. It like the whole series is mired by a lack of imagination, and it should have been so much better for a big production like that.
Yeah, that's fair. It's again, the word for the show is frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Super frustrating. And I really hope that they stop trying to fill in these blanks. And it makes me really worried about, not even really worried. I'm just sort of resigned to the fact that the Andor TV series that's coming up is probably not going to be that good. I mean, it's
I don't know.
it has potential to be good, but at this point, as a person
So that's
who I haven't liked this, the Book of Boba Fett is pretty bad. The Mandalorian is uneven as fuck. Um, I just don't have any faith that Andor is going to be anything other than fine.
the only thing that makes me positive about Andor. First of all, it's an offshoot from Rogue One, and I would have Rogue One's babies if it was a person. And there's going to be the trailer has shown two things that give me hope. The first is lots of new faces, and
Hmm.
the second is lots of physical sets, people actually walking through outdoor sets. And I would love for that to be a recurring theme in all of Andor if they just went outside a little bit and actually used like physical places to film in. Remember that? Uh,
Yeah,
so we'll see. We'll see. Very cautious about it though, but we'll see.
yeah.
But Andor's the same. Like we know how it ends for Andor. I'm very interested in this. He gives a little bit of backstory in Rogue One, but I'm interested to see his the early days of the rebellion. I really like the character. I think he's a very interesting actor as well. I'm interested to see that, but very cautious,
Here's the
definitely.
thing, though. Again, we've already seen the early days of the rebellion because we have Star Wars Rebels, and we also
Mm-hmm.
have Star Wars: The Bad Batch, which is clearly headed in the same direction. I don't think it's as good as Rebels, but it's
Mm-hmm.
better than Clone Wars, and it's that's unfair. I'm pretty positive on Clone Wars, very generally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very uneven due to its
Mm-hmm.
anthology nature. But I think the other thing, and I think um, YouTuber Patrick Willems put it best. The thing that we often forget is that this is a movie about space wizards intended for children, and I think we need to get back to that a little bit. I think the best thing about Rebels is that not only is it just good storytelling, it's also made clearly with children in mind. And a lot of these live
Mm-hmm.
action shows are made for us, and
Yeah.
they are very boring as a result.
No, totally. Like honestly, I spent many years intensely disliking the prequels, and then my kids got old enough to kind of watch them and not be like babies. And when you watch The Phantom Menace with at that time. So my son would have been about 6 or 7, and my daughter would have been about 3 or 4. And their reaction to that movie is this moment where you go, this was never for me. Like,
Hmm.
this was never for me at all. They love that movie. They love the prequels. They also love the sequels, the sequels. And But we won't get into that about the whole Rey stuff. My daughter loves Rey more than any other character in Star Wars. She loves Rey, and she loves that Rey is nothing who decided to be something. And I think that is the core of Star Wars, right? You don't kill the ones you hate. You save the things you love. That's the whole point of Star Wars, and it annoys me when that's the focus of people to argue about when they don't understand Star Wars on a basic level. Anyway,
Hmm.
we're getting into the Last Jedi now, but my point is, you're completely right. And if you want to appreciate the Star Wars that you think you don't like, watch it with a child, and it will completely change your opinion on that movie, like totally.
Yeah. Although to be fair, I still don't understand. I have watched the prequels with kids, and I do not understand how anyone. My I I have nostalgia for lots of bad movies from my childhood. I do not understand the adulation that is lavished upon the prequel trilogies by 20 somethings these days. It boggles my mind.
But I mean,
And that's to say that,
we
like, I haven't rewatched them in the last couple of years, and I actually watched Revenge of the Sith not that long ago, and like at best it is fine, but we're in a whole other territory here. I don't.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it's the same. It's the same. I think the things you watch when you're young have this sheen that carry on with you. Like the Last Starfighter. I love the Last Starfighter. I showed it to my kids, and they're bored out of their mind because it's not a good film.
Oh
Like
yeah, you're not wrong. And that would be my
and
go-to example as well. The Last
yeah,
Starfighter, which I really like, but it's not a good movie. Like, at least I
no,
can admit that to myself, right?
yeah. So nostalgia goes a long way. Definitely, those things that you watch at the right age really stick with you. And now all these people, these 20-year-olds, had like those movies were their Star Wars, and it's wonderful to see that. Even if it's not the feeling I have, it's wonderful for them.
Yeah, true enough.
So, what would you give the whole series out of 5? Then, what's your star count for Kenobi?
Two.
Me too. And I'm conflicted because there are Ewan McGregor's just incredible. The cast is incredible, and it's a
If
2
I
because it's nowhere near as good as it should have been.
if I were if I would give a half star, I would give it two and a half, but I don't, so it's a two.
Yeah.
If
If
I were to break it down, the first four episodes oscillate between like one and two, and the last two episodes are
mhm.
three, and at moments they burgeon onto four territory. But overall, yeah, it's a two. Like, it's not.
There's a 4 moment for me, and that's the it's Ewan McGregor again. Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, and honestly, please go to YouTube and watch them at Star Wars Celebration this year, where they are just like, especially like Ewan's been in the game for a long time, but Hayden Christensen left acting because he was just done with it, and fair dues, who would blame him? And he is just sat there, and you can just see his heart being filled by what's happening around him, and he is so great as well. He's so great. So please go do that. So that's been the most positive thing of the whole thing for me, is to get Hayden Christensen back out and give him some love.
Yeah, true enough. And it's always good to see a nice Canadian boy make good. So.
I didn't know he's from Vancouver until last week. He
Oh
born and
really?
raised in Vancouver. Yeah, I
Yeah,
had no idea.
he lives on a farm in Ontario now. It's he's a fine Canadian lad.
Yeah. So what are we watching next week? What's on the ticket?
One we were supposed to watch something this week that our screeners got a little mixed up. So we'll be watching next week. We'll be talking about a
Oh, yeah.
film that, spoiler alert, I adored, called Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and also something else. We'll be watching something along with that.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, spoiler
I'm
alert,
I'm terrified.
I loved Marcel
Uh,
the Shell a lot, and so did
I,
my
I
wife.
I watched the
My,
trailer, and I'm terrified to watch it with my children because it looks like the kind of thing that's going to teach you feelings.
Yes,
Like,
it is. There has not been that many things. My wife is quite she's very smart and she's very critical. And when it's often she really likes things, but it's very infrequent that she loves things. And I rate things out of 5, which she hates, and she rates them out of 10. Um, and oftentimes we'll watch something that she really likes, and she'll be like, "Yeah, that was a solid 8.5, 8, 9, 9 out of 10, 9.5 out of 10." And there's been two instances in the past 8 years that we've been together that she has, at the end of something, jumped up and been like 10 out of 10, like physically jumped out of her seat and been 10
oh
out of
wow,
10. And Marcel the Shell with Shoes On is one of them. So that's what we're talking about next week.
what was the other one?
The Queen's Gambit on Netflix.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about. Not to hype it up too much for Simon, who it was his screener that got messed up, not mine. So I have seen it and he hasn't. And that's. But my review is going to be glowing. My legitimate worry is that by the time you have a chance to see it, I will have forgotten too much of the detail. But it's.
Well, you'll just have to rewatch it.
Yeah, yeah. And then there will be something else. I don't know what the other thing is yet, but there'll be something else.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for listening. And now for some messages.
Yes. Thank you for listening. We appreciate you very, very much. If you've liked what you heard, please like, subscribe, 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. Tell a friend. Tell 2 friends. These are the things that help us the most. If you would like to support us a little more directly, we do have a Patreon. You can find that linked in the show notes, but it is patreon.com/McSimpson. That's McSimpson for those of you who are thinking it. We, of course, produce this here in Vancouver on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. Simon, do you have anything last minute you want to add?
No, just really appreciate getting messages from people who are engaged with the podcast and want to talk about it is really wonderful. So I just want to say thank you for listening and for pushing us up the various charts or the various podcast charts that we're on. And it means a lot that people are enjoying it and engaging it because we love recording it as well. So thank you for listening so much.
Indeed. Everything he said, ditto. And so that's it for the show today. Thank you so much for listening and joining us on this awesome Friday.
Bye.